They had everything. A hero that millions of kids grew up idolizing, a mythology so rich you could spend 20 episodes inside it and never run out of story, a fan base that was already there, already loyal, already asking for exactly this. And when the live-action adaptation finally arrived, the reaction wasn't rage. It wasn't celebration either. It was something quieter, and in some ways far more unsettling. It was disappointment that still had warmth in it. And that combination, that strange tension between gratitude and grief, is what makes the Ben 10 live-action films worth examining closely. Because there's something underneath the obvious criticisms, something that the standard "it was limited by budget" explanation doesn't actually cover. And once you see it, the way you think about these films changes completely. So before we get to what went wrong, and a lot went wrong, there's a question I want you to hold on to. A question I'll come back to at the very end. And it's this: what if the movies weren't made for the fans? Not in the cynical way that phrase usually gets used. Something more specific, more structural, something that was decided before a single frame was shot. But to understand that, we have to start somewhere else entirely.
Ben 10 premiered in 2005 on Cartoon Network, and it did something unusual for a children's superhero show. It didn't just give its protagonist powers, it gave him a system. The Omnitrix wasn't a gadget, it was a mythology engine. Every alien transformation came with its own biology, its own limitations, its own story implications. Heat Blast was fire and recklessness. Ghost Freak was unsettling in ways the show barely acknowledged. XLR8 had speed, but not control. The animated series understood something that almost no children's property understood at the same level. Ben's power wasn't just he can transform. The power was the choice. Which alien? Which moment? Which consequence? And every episode was built around that tension. What happens when you have every tool imaginable and still choose the wrong one? That's what fans fell in love with, not just the spectacle, the logic beneath the spectacle. Now hold that thought, because what comes next is where something starts to shift. Race Against Time arrived in 2007, Ben 10 Alien Swarm followed in 2009, and the fan reaction across both films, across years of discussion, settled into a pattern that's almost identical in both cases. Fans were glad the films existed, and they were underwhelmed by what the films actually were. The criticisms were consistent enough to be almost clinical. The movies looked like extended TV episodes. The production design felt limited. The sets felt indoor. The world felt smaller than a show with a fraction of a live-action film's production resources somehow managed to make it feel every single week in animated form. And there was one criticism above all others that kept surfacing, kept repeating, kept arriving in fan comments and forum posts and reaction videos for years afterward. Where are all the aliens? Simple question, devastating in its implications. Because here's the thing about that criticism. It's not really about runtime. It's not even really about budget. It's about a fundamental promise that the franchise makes, has always made, to everyone watching. Every time the Omnitrix appears on screen, it is making a contract with the audience. The contract says something is going to change. Something unexpected is about to happen. The story you thought you were watching is about to become a different story entirely. And if you limit that, if you reduce the number of times that contract gets honored, you're not just reducing alien screen time, you're removing the engine that generates surprise. You're telling the audience, without saying it directly, that this version of Ben 10 is not going to give them the thing they came for. That's what the fans felt, and they felt it even when they couldn't quite name it. Now let's talk about the CGI, because this is where the context matters more than people usually admit. When both films were released, the visual effects were described by most viewers as acceptable. Not impressive, not bad enough to ruin the experience, just acceptable. And that word keeps appearing in the discourse, acceptable, which, when you're dealing with a franchise whose entire identity is built around the visual spectacle of alien transformation, is almost a death sentence. Compare it to what was happening in cinema at the exact same time. Transformers arrived in 2007, the same year as Race Against Time. Iron Man was 2008, 1 year before Alien Swarm. These weren't just benchmark films for visual effects, they were recalibrating what audiences expected from any superhero property in any format at any budget level. And suddenly, a television budget alien transformation was going to be measured against Optimus Prime on a freeway and Tony Stark breaking the sound barrier. The comparison isn't entirely fair. Television budgets are not theatrical budgets. Everyone understands that intellectually. But audiences don't divide their emotional responses by budget category. They feel what they feel. And what many fans felt was a gap, a visible, uncomfortable gap between the franchise they carried in their imagination and the version of it being shown to them on screen. Now here's where something interesting starts to emerge.
If you map out every major criticism of both films, a pattern appears that isn't immediately obvious. The small-scale sets, the limited transformations, the grounded Earth-based conflicts, the villains who, despite having genuine narrative potential, never quite reached the menacing gravity of the animated series' best antagonists. The casting debates. Some felt the actors tried their best, others felt something essential about each character never quite translated. These aren't random failures. They don't arrive from random directions. They follow a consistent logic. And every single one of them points toward the same source. Not the budget, something else. These films were made as television movies, not just produced at a television budget, but conceived, structured, and delivered as television experiences. And that distinction matters more than it might seem. A theatrical film has a different relationship with scope. It's expected to expand, to go somewhere the weekly series couldn't, to justify its own existence through size and ambition. A television movie doesn't carry that obligation. A television movie is designed to satisfy, not to elevate. It's designed to give an audience more of what they already recognize, not to transform the audience's relationship with the material. And that's the beginning of the answer to the question I asked at the start. What if the movies weren't made for the fans? They were made for an audience that needed to be kept comfortable, an audience that needed a familiar, manageable experience, an audience that, and this is the uncomfortable part, may not have been the devoted fans at all. It may have been the casual viewers, the kids who liked the show but weren't tracking the mythology, the parents in the room, the network executives who needed deliverable content with manageable risk and measurable returns. And the devoted fans? The people who knew every alien, every episode, every villain's backstory, every Omnitrix malfunction by heart? They were watching. They were absolutely watching, but they might not have been the target. Now, here's where I want to slow down, because something shifts around this point in the conversation about these films, a shift that almost never gets examined directly. Alien Swarm is better than Race Against Time. This is one of the few things most fans agree with without much argument. Better CGI, darker tone, stronger action sequences, a more confident visual style. Ben felt older and more capable. The storyline had genuine horror elements. There was a sequence involving the alien microchip invasion that built real tension in a way the first film rarely achieved. And yet, even the fans who call it the better film almost always include a qualifier. Better, but still not quite right. Improved, but still limited. Closer, but still not there. That qualifier is more significant than it appears because it suggests that the problem with these films wasn't something that more skill or more effort alone could have solved. The structure itself was working against them. The format was the ceiling, and no matter how much they improved within that format, the ceiling didn't rise. Here's what makes that haunting. Alien Swarm demonstrably improved. It shows real growth. It shows that the people involved were learning, were pushing, were genuinely trying to close the gap between what they could do and what the material deserved. And they got closer. But closer to what? What is the version of Ben 10 that has never been made? What would it actually look like? What would it feel like to sit in a theater watching it?
Think about what the animated series was doing at its best. Planetary-scale storytelling, alien biology with implications that rippled through entire episodes, emotional complexity filtered through the lens of a 10-year-old boy who had been given more power than any adult in his world knew how to handle, questions about identity, questions about choice, questions about what it means to be the person the universe selected, not because you were ready, but because the watch landed on your wrist. A film that genuinely honored that material would need to go to those planets, would need to show alien civilizations that weren't just backdrops, civilizations with their own logic, their own stakes, their own reasons for caring whether Ben wins or loses, would need a villain with actual menace, not just a character described as a threat through dialogue, but a character whose presence makes you understand, viscerally, why the Omnitrix needs to be in the right hands. Vilgax. Let's just say the name, Vilgax. In the animated series, Vilgax is not a villain who appears and delivers threats. He is a force of inevitability. He is the reason the Omnitrix was always supposed to be somewhere else, in someone else's hands, somewhere this warlord could never reach it. Every time he appears, the audience understands something about the stakes that no amount of exposition could convey more efficiently. He doesn't explain why he's dangerous, he demonstrates it by simply being on screen. Neither live-action film gave us anything approaching that weight. Eon had potential. The DNA alien storyline in Swarm had genuine horror logic behind it, but neither villain carried the presence that the franchise's mythology demanded at its highest level. And the absence of that gravity, that fundamental sense of threat, is part of why both films feel incomplete, even to viewers who genuinely enjoyed them. Something essential to the equation was missing, and the audience felt the missing weight,
So
even when
here's
they
what the
couldn't
fan
precisely
consensus
describe
actually
what was
reveals
gone.
when you read it carefully enough. It's not anger, it's not dismissal, it's something more precise. It's the grief of almost. Almost enough, almost there, almost the thing it could have been. Fans who grew up with this show carry a very clear internal image of what Ben 10 looks like when it's working at its best. They know the pacing, they know the visual logic, they know what it feels like when a transformation is earned, when Ben reaches for the Omnitrix not because the plot requires it mechanically, but because the moment has built to the point where there's no other choice, when the wrong alien would be the interesting choice and he picks it anyway. And watching the live-action films, that internal image kept flickering, sometimes matching, sometimes a performance landed just right, or a shot was framed in a way that felt genuinely cinematic, like the film had momentarily remembered what it was supposed to be. And in those moments, you could feel what was possible. You could almost see the version of this film that existed just slightly out of reach. And then the moment would pass, and you'd be back in a corridor that looked like a soundstage, back with an alien whose design felt flattened compared to the drawings it came from, back with a conflict that the animation had always made feel universe-spanning, scaled down to fit something you could finish watching before dinner. The grief of almost. That's the precise emotion at the center of this conversation. But here's the layer beneath that grief that I don't think gets enough attention. The nostalgia for these films exists anyway, despite everything. Despite the limited transformations and the TV-scale production and the villains who never quite achieved what the story needed them to be, people still remember both films with genuine warmth. Adults who were 10 years old when Race Against Time aired still feel something real when they think about it. Not because it was perfect, because it was theirs. Because for whatever its limitations, it was the first time the world they'd lived inside their imaginations became, imperfectly, approximately, but actually, real. That matters. It genuinely, undeniably matters. It doesn't erase the limitations, but it complicates the story in a way that makes it more human than any pure critique can account for. And here's the paradox that keeps resurfacing the more you sit with it. The very audience whose expectations weren't fully met is also the audience that holds these films the closest. The people who should be the harshest critics are often the ones who defend both films most genuinely. Not by claiming they were great, by claiming they were important. If you trace the fan conversations chronologically, not just across both films, but across the years of discussion that followed, you notice that the tone gradually shifts. Early reactions were sharper, more directly disappointed, more comparative. Over time, the criticism softened. The nostalgia deepened.
people started contextualizing the films within the era more generously. For a 2007 television movie, it did what it could. For the budget they had, they tried. That reframing is interesting on its own, but there's something else happening underneath it that I think is even more significant. What the fans were actually doing, through years of criticism, through years of asking where all the aliens were, through years of debating casting and CGI and scale and villain presence, was building a detailed, sustained, collective argument for something that didn't exist yet. They weren't just criticizing what they got. They were, paragraph by paragraph, fan comment by fan comment, describing with increasing precision what they actually wanted, what the right version of this would look like, what it would need to have, what it couldn't afford to leave out. And that leads to the thing at the center of this entire conversation that nobody says directly, but everyone already knows. The potential is still there, completely untouched. The Ben 10 universe, the full version, the theatrical version, the version that has never been made, is still waiting. Think about what the superhero adaptation landscape looks like now compared to 2007. Think about what visual effects at a serious theatrical budget can accomplish. Think about what a filmmaker with genuine creative ambition and genuine love for this material could do given the freedom to go to the places the animated series went without compromise. Every alien planet, every civilization, every transformation given the weight and the screen time and the design detail it deserves. And Vilgax, actually Vilgax, built not for a television audience managing a television budget, but for an IMAX screen with no ceiling on the menace. That film doesn't exist yet. And that's the fact that sits at the center of every Ben 10 live-action conversation, not even when nobody's saying it directly. Not the movies we got were bad, but something quieter, and in some ways more difficult. The movie we're still waiting for hasn't been made.
And now I want to return to where we started. What if the movies weren't made for the fans? I think the full answer is now more complicated than it was when I first posed the question. The films weren't made for the fans, structurally speaking. They were made for a wider, more casual audience. They were designed to satisfy at a comfortable altitude, not to ascend. The format was chosen for manageability. The scope was calibrated for safety. But the fans watched anyway. And in watching, in criticizing, in comparing, in asking the same question over and over in different forms across different years, they did something that probably wasn't part of anyone's calculation when those films were greenlit. They kept the conversation alive. Where Are All the Aliens is not just a complaint about two television movies from the late 2000s. It's a proof of concept. It's evidence, accumulated slowly over decades, that the audience is there, that the passion is there, that the mythology is rich enough, deep enough, and beloved enough to support something genuinely ambitious, something that doesn't manage expectations, something that exceeds them. The fans weren't the target of those films, but they might be the reason a better one eventually gets made. And that's the thing that lingers when this conversation finally closes. Not what was lost, not the transformations that didn't happen, or the villain who never reached the screen with the gravity he deserved, or the alien planets that stayed off camera to manage a budget. Not even the feeling of watching something you loved be translated into something smaller than you'd imagined. What lingers is what's still possible. There is a version of Ben 10 with the scale it deserves, with every alien given the screen presence that design demands, with a villain large enough to make the Omnitrix feel like the only answer, with a story that trusts the audience's intelligence and the material's depth, told at a budget that matches the imagination behind it. And it hasn't been made yet. Maybe it will be. Maybe the window has already closed in ways we can't see from here. Maybe the next attempt comes soon, or maybe it comes in 10 years, or maybe it never comes at all. But every time someone asks where are all the aliens, whether they're watching a 2007 television film for the first time or revisiting it 17 years later for the nostalgia, they're not just expressing disappointment, they're keeping a space open for something that hasn't arrived yet. And I don't know exactly what to do with that.
but I think about it more than I probably should.